On the morning of November 15th, 2023, in the bustling heart of Toronto, the Fairorn Royal York Hotel gleamed with the kind of majesty that had hosted dignitaries, celebrities, and lovers for decades. But on this day, it would become the stage for a tragedy so chilling it would shock not only the Indian-Canadian community, but the entire nation. Because what began as the happiest day of a young couple's new life together ended in blood, betrayal, and death. The bride, dressed in an ornate red, lehenga embroidered with golden threads and adorned with sparkling jewelry, had been celebrated by hundreds of guests just hours before, her smile hiding secrets that not even her closest friends could have guessed, while the groom, proud, strong, and filled with dreams of a life built on love and trust, believed he was marrying not only the woman of his heart, but his destiny. Yet beneath the layers of tradition and festivity, a dark truth lingered, one that was about to erupt inside the luxurious honeymoon suite of room 1602, where the silken sheets and champagne glasses would soon become evidence of a violent storm of rage. It all began quietly, with hushed words, the groom stumbling upon fragments of the bride's double life through a late-night phone buzzing with messages she had carelessly left unlocked, each text peeling back a layer of deception, revealing names of men he had never known, details of hidden rendezvous, and promises that mocked the vows she had spoken at. The Mandip. And as his heart raced and his hands shook, the groom confronted her, demanding answers, his voice rising from pain to fury, while the bride's charm and practiced calm quickly faded into nervous denial, then sharp defensiveness, until the mask she had worn so flawlessly at the wedding shattered under the weight of his anger. Voices echoed through the walls, neighbors later reporting muffled shouting and the crash of glass. But inside the room the confrontation spiraled beyond words. The groom's disbelief turning into something primal, an uncontrollable storm fueled by betrayal and humiliation. Because for him, it wasn't just about lies. It was about honor, family, and the very foundation of trust ripped apart on the very night that should have bound them forever. In those final moments, as rage overcame reason, the groom struck, fists colliding with fragile skin, the bride's cries swallowed by the thick carpets and walls of luxury, her bangles breaking, scattering like shattered dreams across the floor, and within minutes the life that had once been filled with hope and beauty was extinguished, her body left lifeless on the very bed meant for love, her once bright eyes staring blankly at the crystal chandelier above, while groom, trembling, his breath heavy with shock and regret, realized that in one night, in one uncontrollable act, he had destroyed everything, his bride, his marriage, his freedom, and his soul, leaving behind not just a corpse but a story, a betrayal and violence that would ripple far beyond the confines of that hotel room, setting in motion investigations, headlines, and whispers that would forever haunt the corridors of the Royal York and community that had celebrated their union only hours earlier. The luxury suite of the Fairorn Royal York Hotel stood eerily silent, its golden chandeliers glimmering faintly in the early morning light. The scene that unfolded inside was one no one could have imagined. Police taped cordon off the door, and a sense of dread hung heavy in the air. What was meant to be the start of a fairy tale marriage had instead turned into the darkest chapter of two families' lives. Just hours earlier, the lavish wedding had dazzled the Indian-Canadian community of Toronto. Guests recalled the radiant bride, draped in a crimson lehenga embroidered with gold threads, her smile bright as though her entire future stretched before her like a dream. The groom, dignified in his sherwani, had looked at her with such adoration that many whispered, "They are meant to be." No one could have predicted that within a single night, their marriage would be torn apart by blood and betrayal. As the investigators pieced together the events of that tragic night, one detail became clear. The groom had uncovered truth that shook him to his core. While the wedding festivities ended, the couple had retired to their honeymoon suite. For a while, things appeared normal. But somewhere between the first toast of champagne and the quiet intimacy of their new life together, secrets came crashing into the open. The groom had received messages, anonymous, yet alarmingly precise, claiming that the bride was living a double life. At first, he dismissed them as malicious rumors. After all, why would anyone tarnish the sanctity of his marriage on such a joyous occasion? But the messages continued, and their content grew darker. Names, places, even photographs of the bride with another man. In the suite that night, unable to suppress his doubts, the groom confronted her. The words were sharp, laced with fury and disbelief. Who is he? How long have you been lying to me? The bride froze, her face pale as though the very air had been stolen from her lungs. She tried to deny it, but the evidence he presented was undeniable. Neighbors in nearby suites later told investigators they had heard muffled voices escalating into shouting. One witness even recalled a thud, followed by silence. The bride's pleas, soft and trembling, carried fragments of confession. She had indeed hidden parts of her life, parts that would have shattered the marriage had they come out earlier. She had been involved with another man back in Vancouver, a shadow from her past she hoped to leave behind. But the past has sharp claws, and it followed her into the heart of her new beginning. When the confrontation reached its peak, the bride chose silence over explanation. For the groom, this silence was louder than any confession. Rage blinded him. A lifetime of love, loyalty, and dreams he had built his mind collapsed in a matter of minutes. By the time dawn broke, tragedy had already struck. The bride was found lifeless on the satin sheets, her delicate bangles shattered on the floor like glass shards of a broken promise. The groom, his hands trembling, was seated in shock near the bedside when authorities arrived. His face was expressionless, a mask of disbelief, as though even he could not comprehend what had transpired. The once picturesque honeymoon suite was now a crime scene. The fragrance of roses, once meant to celebrate love, mingled with the metallic scent of blood. On the vanity, the bride's wedding jewelry lay scattered, symbols of a union that had lasted barely a day. News of the incident spread like wildfire. By morning, the Indian-Canadian community was engulfed in grief and disbelief. Families whispered in hushed tones at gurdwaras and community centers. How could a bride, celebrated just hours ago, meet such a brutal fate? And how could the groom, seen as a respectable, kind-hearted man, become the central figure in such a nightmare? The bride's family, devastated, demanded justice. They argued she had been misunderstood, that her past did not define her, and that no mistake deserved such an end. The groom's relatives, equally shattered, maintained that he had been provoked beyond reason, that betrayal had twisted his heart into darkness. What made the tragedy more haunting was the fact that both families had invested not just money, but their deepest hopes into this marriage. The union was meant to bring joy, strengthen bonds, and elevate their standing in the community. Instead, it tore them apart, leaving only suspicion, shame, and grief. Detectives began sifting through phone records, social media accounts, and testimonies from close friends. The anonymous messages that triggered the groom's rage were traced back to an unverified number. Who sent them? A jealous ex-lover? A family member who opposed the marriage? Or someone who simply wanted to watch lives crumble? The bride's personal diary, discovered in her luggage, revealed cryptic entries. One page, in particular, caught investigators' attention. I thought I could start over, but secrets don't die, they wait. These haunting words hinted that she had long feared her past would return to destroy her. The groom's statements to the police wavered between remorse and justification. At times, he broke down, insisting he had loved her more than life itself. At others, he hardened, claiming betrayal had left him no choice. His legal team prepared for a defense of crime of passion, while the prosecution framed the incident as cold-blooded murder. The case quickly became a media storm. Headlines screamed across newspapers and online platforms. Indian bride killed on wedding night, and Toronto love story turns deadly. Talk shows debated morality, betrayal, and fragility of arranged marriages. The community split into two camps: those who sympathized with the groom's pain and those who condemned his brutality. Elders worried about the image of the Indian community abroad. Parents, meanwhile, feared for their children, warning them against secrecy in relationships. And young couples whispered in private, "If love can end like this, what hope do we have?" In the bride's childhood home, her mother clutched the wedding dupatta, her tears soaking the fabric. She replayed memories of her daughter's laughter, her little footsteps in the courtyard, her dreams of building a new life. For her, the wedding night had ended not in joy but in preparing for a funeral. The groom's father, meanwhile, stared blankly at the photographs of his son's Barrett. "He was a good boy," he repeated endlessly, unable to reconcile the image of his smiling son with the reality of the crime he was accused of. Both families were bound now, not by celebration, but by grief and court hearings. Yet, as the trial loomed closer, many questions remained unanswered. Who sent those mysterious messages? Was the bride truly guilty of betrayal, or was she a victim of manipulation? Did the groom plan his violent act, or was it an uncontrollable outburst of passion? The truth was as clouded as the tears that blurred the eyes of those left behind. The tragedy had scarred not just two families, but an entire community, serving as a haunting reminder that love, when built on lies and silence, can collapse into horror. The sun had long set over Toronto, blanketing the city skyline in a quiet, wintry calm. Inside the Grand Fairorn Royal York Hotel, the lavish honeymoon suite glimmered with golden chandeliers and silk curtains, exuding an air of celebration and new beginnings. For everyone else, this was just another night. But for Ariv and Mira, it was supposed to be the first chapter of their married life. Mira sat before the mirror, still dressed in her elaborate bridal lehenga, its red and gold threads shimmering under the warm light. The heavy jewelry clung to her tired face, her lips painted into a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She stared at her reflection, almost as if she did not recognize the woman staring back at her. Behind her, Ariv entered, loosening his Sherwani collar. His sharp features, usually softened by his charm, were now hardened with suspicion. He carried 2 glasses of champagne in his hand, setting them down on the table with deliberate force. "Cheers," he said with a faint smile, his voice calm but edged with tension. Mira hesitated before picking up her glass. Their eyes met in the mirror, hers nervous, his unwavering. They clinked glasses, and the sound echoed louder than it should have in the silence of the room. As they sipped, Ariv leaned closer. "You know, Mira, people talk." Mira froze for a second, but forced a soft laugh. "People always talk, especially in our community." Ariv's jaw tightened. "Yes, but this time they're not just talking, they're whispering about you." Her fingers trembled around the glass. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ariv placed his drink down and walked to the dresser. He picked up his phone and unlocked it. With a swipe, he revealed a string of messages, photos, and voice notes. His eyes darkened. "This is what I mean." Mira's heart pounded in her chest. She put her glass down, her face draining of color. Ariv placed the phone in front of her. On the screen were photos of her with another man, smiling, holding hands, intimate moments captured in different places around Toronto. There were text exchanges that spoke of love, secrecy, and promises. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Who is he?" Ariv demanded, his voice now sharper. Tears welled up in Mira's eyes. "Ariv, please. I can explain." "Explain." Ariv's voice thundered, shattering the fragile calm in the room. He slammed his hand against the dresser, making the mirror shake. "You lied to me, to my family, to everyone. You let me marry you while you were living another life behind my back." Mira's body shook. "It wasn't like that. I loved him before, but things changed. I didn't know how to stop it. How to what?" Ariv cut her off, his eyes blazing with betrayal. How to keep playing both sides. How to keep living a double life, while I stood here like a fool. Mira broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "I was scared. My parents forced me into this marriage. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe I could start fresh with you, that maybe the past wouldn't matter." "The past always matters," Ariv snapped. He turned away from her, pacing across the suite like a caged tiger. His breaths grew heavier, his fists clenching and unclenching. Every word she had said only fueled the storm raging inside him. Mira rose from her seat and approached him carefully. She reached out, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Ariv, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to make this work. Give me a chance, and I'll—" He spun around, his eyes filled with a fury Mira had never seen before. "A chance? After this?" He shoved the phone into her hands, forcing her to look again at the damning evidence. "Do you think marriage is a game? Do you think I am a game?" Mira shook her head desperately. "No, please believe me. I'll end it. I'll cut ties with him tonight. I'll prove it to you." But Ariv was past reason. His trust, his pride, his very sense of dignity had been shattered. He grabbed the champagne bottle and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall, shards scattering like broken promises. "Do you have any idea what this means for me? For my family," he roared. "The shame, the humiliation. You destroyed everything." Mira backed away, her sobs echoing through the suite. "I'm sorry, Arif. Please, I beg you, don't do this." But something inside Arif had already snapped. Rage overtook reason, and betrayal drowned out compassion. In his mind, she was no longer his bride. She was the person who had made a mockery of his love and his life. He stepped toward her, his shadow looming over her trembling figure. "You should have told me the truth, Mira. You should have given me honesty instead of lies." Mira shook her head violently, crying, "I was afraid. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with brutal force. She cried out in pain as he pulled her close, his face inches from hers. Now it's too late. The room filled with the sound of struggle, pleading cries, gasps, the crash of furniture. Outside, the hallway remained silent, unaware of the tragedy unfolding within. When it was over, the one celebratory suite stood in ruins. The golden chandeliers still glowed, the champagne still fizzed in the glasses, but the joy of a new beginning had curdled into horror. Mira lay motionless on the floor, her bridal veil torn and her bangles shattered. Arif stood over her, chest heaving, his eyes wide as reality crashed down on him. His hands, stained with the weight of his actions, trembled uncontrollably. Silence enveloped the room. The wedding night had become a night of death, and in that silence, Arif realized there was no turning back. The grand oak doors of the Toronto Superior Court opened on a frigid January morning, unleashing a storm of flashing cameras, murmuring reporters, and a crowd desperate to witness justice unfold. The city had been gripped by the shocking story of Arif and Mira, a tale that was no longer confined to whispers within the Indian-Canadian community. It had become a nationwide obsession. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric, a blend of anticipation and grief. At the center sat Arif Malhotra, the once proud groom, now a broken man in shackles. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, carrying the weight of both love and rage that had led him to this place. He wore a navy blue suit, pressed but lifeless, chosen by his lawyer to remind the jury that he was more than just a monster painted by the prosecution. Opposite him, the prosecution table gleamed with files, photographs, and carefully assembled evidence. Crown Attorney Marcus Bell, a sharp and unyielding man, was determined to make this case an example. To him, Mira's murder was not only about a man's rage, but about exposing a cycle of control, obsession, and betrayal. The trial began with the judge's stern voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are about to hear is a case that has shocked the conscience of this nation. I remind you to focus only on the evidence presented and not the speculation outside these walls." Marcus Bell wasted no time. His opening statement cut like glass. On the night of November 15th, 2023, the accused, Arif Malhotra, brutally beat his new bride, Mira Sharma, in their honeymoon suite. What should have been a night of love became a night of horror. This was no accident. This was not passion. This was murder, committed in cold blood when the accused discovered the victim's double life. He then presented evidence. Crime scene photos, the blood-stained sheets, and the autopsy report detailing fractures, internal bleeding, and blunt force trauma. The jury gasped at the sight, and Arif closed his eyes, as though each image dragged him deeper into despair. Next came the testimony of hotel staff. A maid recounted hearing muffled screams around midnight, but assumed it was a private matter between the newlyweds. Another staff member recalled Arif storming out of the suite around 2 a.m., his shirt stained, his eyes wild. But the most devastating moment was when the prosecution unveiled Mira's secret life. Witnesses included a man named Jason Miller, a Canadian businessman, who tearfully admitted to having an affair with Mira for nearly a year. He described her as trapped between two worlds, one of tradition and one of freedom. The jury listened, conflicted. Mira was no longer just a victim. She was a complex woman, torn between cultural expectations and personal desires. When it was finally the defense's turn, Arv's lawyer, Priya Nanda, rose. Calm but fierce, she painted a different picture. This is not a case of premeditated murder. This is a tragedy fueled by betrayal, humiliation, and a cultural clash that many of us in this room cannot fully understand. My client did not wake up that morning planning to kill his bride. He was pushed into an uncontrollable emotional storm when the truth was forced upon him. She described Arv as a man of honor, raised with strict family values, whose dreams of love and stability were shattered within hours of his marriage. He acted in a moment of blind rage, not with calculated cruelty, she argued, hoping to shift the jury's view toward manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. Arv himself took the stand, his voice trembling as he recounted the night. She smiled at me when we checked in, like everything was fine, but then I found her phone. The messages, pictures with another man. I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. I begged her for answers, but she laughed. She said I was just one of her obligations, not her love. In that moment, I wasn't myself. I was drowning in betrayal. His words cracked, and a hush fell over the room. Some jurors wiped tears. Others remained stone-faced. Outside the courtroom, protests erupted. One side demanded justice for Mira, her face plastered on posters that read, "Stop Domestic Violence." The other side argued for Arv, claiming he was as much a victim of deception as Mira was of violence. The trial had exposed deep cultural tensions between tradition and modernity, between arranged expectations and personal choice. News outlets dissected every detail. Talk shows debated whether Arv's rage was understandable or unforgivable. The case took a shocking twist when a new witness came forward, a friend of Mira's named Alicia. She revealed private conversations where Mira had confessed she never wanted to marry Arv but felt forced by her parents. She told me she was suffocating. She said, "I can't live two lives, but I don't know how to choose." This revelation shook the courtroom. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't just about Arv's violence, but about a woman torn apart by cultural duty and personal freedom. The jury now carried the weight of two broken souls, not just one. Marcus Bell's closing was thunderous. No matter what secrets Mira carried, no matter what choices she made, she did not deserve to die. We cannot excuse violence because of betrayal. We cannot allow rage to justify murder. Priya countered passionately. My client is guilty of losing control. Yes, but he is not guilty of cold-blooded murder. He is guilty of being human, of breaking under unbearable emotional torment. Do not let this tragedy be worsened by ignoring the complexity of the truth. The jury deliberated for 3 long days. When they finally returned, the courtroom was silent, every breath suspended. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Arv Malhotra, guilty of second-degree murder. Gasps erupted. Arv's mother sobbed in the gallery. Arv himself sat motionless, staring at the floor as though his soul had already left his body. He would face life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The trial ended, but the questions lingered. Who was the true victim? Mira, who died in a web of lies, or Arv, who destroyed his life in a moment of madness? The story became a cautionary tale, not just of betrayal and rage, but of cultural clashes and a fragile line between love and possession. As the courtroom emptied, the only sound that remained was the echo of what could have been a love story never written, a future forever lost. The morning after the funeral was unlike any other. A heavy silence hung over Toronto's Indian community. People whispered, argued, and speculated. But one thing was certain. This tragedy had shaken everyone to their core. The newspapers screamed in bold letters, "Bride murdered on wedding night. Secrets uncovered." For many, it was simply another crime story. But for those closest to it, the wounds ran deeper than headlines could ever capture. The story was not just about a marriage gone wrong. It was about trust, betrayal, and the devastating weight of secrets. 3 months later, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Journalists packed the benches, community leaders gathered, and family members sat with broken hearts. The accused, Arjun Malhotra, sat at the defendant's table, his face pale, his hands trembling. Across from him sat the family of the deceased bride, Priya Kapoor, whose framed photo rested near her grieving parents. The prosecution opened with a chilling account. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not just a crime of passion. It is a crime born from deception. A groom, betrayed by lies, reacted with violence. But no matter the circumstances, murder is murder. Arjun's defense attorney countered, his voice firm. This man, a respected businessman and a kind soul, was pushed into a storm of emotions. On the night of his wedding, he discovered the woman he loved was not who she claimed to be. She had a hidden life, one that would have shattered any man. Was his reaction tragic? Yes. But was it cold-blooded murder? No. The tension in the room was electric. As the trial unfolded, shocking details of Priya's double life came into the open. Witnesses testified that she had maintained a secret relationship in Vancouver, where she often traveled under pretense of work. Photos, text messages, and bank transfers revealed a web of deceit. Priya's best friend, reluctantly called to the stand, confirmed it with tears in her eyes. She loved Arjun in her own way, but she couldn't let go of the other man. She was living two lives, and it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as the evidence piled up. The community was divided. Some sympathized with Arjun, believing he had been driven to madness by betrayal. Others condemned him, arguing that no betrayal could justify the brutal end of a young woman's life. When it was Arjun's turn to speak, the courtroom fell silent. He stood, his voice trembling but clear. I loved Priya. From the moment I met her, I thought she was my destiny. I gave her my heart, my trust, my future. On our wedding night, when I learned the truth, something inside me broke. I was myself. I was a man destroyed. I never want to kill her. I only wanted the lies to stop. But in my rage, I did something unforgivable. And now, I live every day with that guilt. His words moved some to tears, but the jury's task was not to judge his sorrow. It was to decide his fate. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman stood, holding the piece of paper that would decide Arjun's future. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Gasps, sobs, and murmurs filled the room. Priya's parents wept silently, clutching each other's hands. Arjun closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. The judge's gavel struck. Arjun Malhotra, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 15 years. And with that, the chapter seemed to close. But the ripples of this tragedy were far from over. The community was left scarred. Priya's story became a cautionary tale, whispered at family gatherings and retold at cultural events. Parents urged their children to be honest in relationships, warning them that lies, even small ones, could destroy lives. Arjun, from behind bars, wrote letters to Priya's family, apologizing endlessly, though most went unanswered. He became a shadow of the man he once was, consumed by regret. As for Priya, her name lived on in two ways, one as a victim of cruel fate, and another as a woman who tried to live two lives but lost them both. Years later, questions still lingered. Was Priya truly in love with a man in Vancouver, or was she trapped in a life she couldn't escape? Did Arjun act purely out of rage, or had he known more than he admitted that night? The truth, perhaps, was buried with Priya, but what remained was a haunting reminder. When trust is broken, love can transform into something darker than anyone can imagine. The Fairmont Royal York Hotel eventually renovated the honeymoon suite where it all happened. Guests checked in, unaware of the dark past that lingered in those walls. Some claimed they could still hear faint sobs or feel a strange chill in the air. Whether true or imagined, it added to the legend of the tragedy. And so, the story of Arjun and Priya became more than just a crime. It became a symbol of how fragile human hearts can be, and how quickly love can turn into horror when secrets are kept too long. The community never forgot. Neither should we. This story reminds us that secrets, no matter how well hidden, always find their way to the surface. And when they do, the consequences can be devastating. If this chilling true crime story gripped you, share it with others, because sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones told in silence.